I love instant messaging. I think it's the way it lets you stay in constant touch. So I've got a group of friends, some of us are Middle Eastern, some South Asian, all Muslim in heritage in some way or another. And some of us are artists, some of us are journalists, some of us are academics of various kinds. And I think what I love about it most is, apart from the way it lets us stay up to date on what's going on in the world, that it gives us a space to have a bit of a, banter that kind of flips back the stereotypes of us that exist in the mainstream media. The jihadi, the drug dealer, the sex offender, the pimp, that sort of thing. So these are some of my favourite Muslim memes. This one here you'll see is a picture of Lionel Richie that says, "Halal, is it meat you're looking for?" And it gives us a space where we can flip back our own sort of banter about the more dominant groups in society as well. Of course, this is the very first edition, to the best of my knowledge, of things white people do. My favourite line being, drink out of coffee mugs with two hands whilst closing their eyes and going, which is scientifically accurate. I quite like those dafter old memes as well, the ones like Pepe the Frog, lol, cats, dog, that you laugh at even though they're a bit old-fashioned and you probably shouldn't anymore. But look, this show isn't about instant messaging and my love of memes. If it was, it would probably be a little bit more entertaining for me than it is for you. It's about men, politics, and the internet. Some of it happens on your phone screen, which is why I've asked you to keep your phones on whilst you watch, why I've asked you to join our WhatsApp group, and why I'm going to ask you as well just to keep your phone tones on whilst the show's happening so you can see when things are landing. And some of it happens on that big screen, because it needs a certain kind of distance. It's the distance that connects you to a voice you don't trust in the middle of the night. You follow a chain of links and now you find yourself alone with me. This story starts in a cell. It's the story of how the West's colonial nightmare of Islam came to life. It's a vision made flesh. This cell could be anywhere, but it isn't. From the uniforms on the prison guards, the heat, the way the inmates speak Arabic, we know that this is a cell in Egypt, 1952. A thin man shakes. On the edge of this desert, he lives a rhythm. Hunger, no sleep, little water, work, interrogation, torture. His large, sad eyes seem even bigger and his naturally fat cheeks hang. One percussive thud and the door to his cell is opened. The acrid midday sun cuts the room in two. 3 men enter. Methodically and medically, they cut his prison clothes away and smear his body in animal fat. From outside the door, there's a barking and a growling. The door is locked and 3 dogs let off their leash. The man loses consciousness around the time he suffers his 3rd heart attack. In that baking hot cell, in that pain and tortured train of semi-conscious thought, Sayyid Qutb, the intellectual father of modern jihadism, has a series of visions that bring together the last 20 years of his thoughts. As his heart arrests, he sees a cosmic division and a choosing of sides. Those early wars, many centuries before, fought between the first Muslims and the Arab polytheists, are not back off in history, but returning eternally, more bloody and violent than every time. There's only one small group of true believers, and they are his followers. Everyone else is a servant of ignorance and a slave of darkness. So his is a vision of love, truth, and utopia that can only be reached by climbing a mountain of corpses. And obviously this show's got me in it too. Like every other Muslim or person of colour or ethnic minority in this country, almost every day I find myself part of a narrative where I'm, the object, not the subject. Part of a story where I'm talked about, but I don't usually get to do the talking. But, we've got this WhatsApp group here between us, and that social media is, of course, a space where everyone gets a voice. So get on there and we will have ourselves just a little bit of a Muslim quiz. Okay, so long story short, there is about 6 million Muslims in this country, of whom less than 600 people, so that's less than 1/1000th of 1%, have gone off to go join a group like ISIS. But I mean, you see what I mean about this space though, yeah? It doesn't matter whether you know what you're talking about, you just wang your views out there. It doesn't matter how well educated you are, how good looking you are, or how expensive your shoes are. It's a space where almost anyone can speak and almost anything can be said, which I suppose is democratic in a way. And there's a final part to this show too, which is the story of some young men who I endeavoured to meet in this weird sort of online space and that I fictionalised and that I'm going to share with you this evening. So there are two Muslims from the UK. One is a shorter, fatter boy called Atif from a sort of rain-lashed southern seaside town. The other is a taller, thinner boy from a now declining post-industrial city in the north called Marwan. So we'll start in England. In 2016, rain lashes a southern English seafront town as Atif and his brothers gather outside a community centre. Atif's the last to arrive because his mum's been poorly. He wanted to visit her in hospital and take her to magazines. When the Sheikh arrives, he's the last of the brothers to be greeted. The Sheikh's got this rich Caribbean accent, a register that shifts from Brixton street foot hustler to then prophet and visionary of the end times. When he's alone, Atif pretends to be able to talk like the Sheikh, but here, in so-called real life, it's only ever just him, the quietest and fattest brother in the group whose hand is always the last to be shook. Atif follows the Sheikh and the rest of the brothers into the community centre. They want to watch the video the Sheikh has brought on the big screen, but they can't get it to work, so they decide to watch on the smaller laptop one. Atif senses a chance. He gets up. He gets the big screen to work and sits down again, still ignored. The video shows a girl in a Syrian bazaar. She sings. The video begins to cut in and out just as the bazaar is bombed. The Sheikh explains to Atif and his brothers what the Syrian people are being made to suffer at the hands of the Shia, the heretics. YouTube autoplays to the next video. It shows pictures of men, their faces covered in keffiyehs that seem rendered as if for a computer game. They're so tall and strong looking, Atif thinks. They're too solid for this world. They march some prisoners to the seashore. The Sheikh hurries to turn off this video. Atif helps him, but in the corner of the screen he notices a logo, Al Hayat Media, in English and Arabic. The Sheikh speaks to condemn ISIS, but our boy, he still thinks about that logo. So that night, he won't drive off to the chicken shop with the rest of the brothers to fight for the Sheikh's attention. He'll go straight home. Pause. Hundreds of miles to the north, Marwan sits. He's taller and thinner, but he carries that same sort of screen front hunch and stomach pit disgust. He's about to click to watch that same video of the Syrian girl being bombed too. Marwan's worked constantly since leaving university. I mean, a fucking law degree. 24, single, educated, and he takes the same bus to the same crumbling primary school to take the same shit from the same kids every day. The girl on the video is different. She's silent over the screams of the rescue workers and the whirring of the regime helicopter blades. There's a plastic click of cheap plastic trackpad as he clicks. Pause. Though they're hundreds of miles apart, in one moment, Marwan in the north and Atif in the south will click play to watch that video at exactly the same time. But where Marwan will watch it on loop over and over again all night, Atif will follow the chain of links and algorithms to the hub. Al Hayat Media still burning in his mind. He's back at home now. And under that cold blue light of his laptop screen, he taps. He finds Twitter accounts of ISIS fighters, men with beards, robes, Kevlar vests, assault rifles, knives, like medieval assassins remade for the 21st century, but coloured in the colour of Game of Thrones, Assassin's Creed, and Call of Duty. He finds the hub, Al Hayat Media, and he finds a magazine called Dabigh. Dabigh makes him dizzy because inside he reads these articles that speak to a feeling that he's been carrying around for months, that every new outrage, every nightclub attacked in America or gay bar attacked in France is part of a plan. A plan that will bring this world that torments and humiliates the Muslims, that torments and humiliates him to its knees. He pores over his copies of Dabiq magazine. He's not even really reading them. He's more just scrolling up and down the screen as if leafing through a catalogue of strength and dignity and ways to be a man. The light's begun to break outside, and he's found an ISIS recruiter called Al-Gharib on a secure broadcasting and messaging service called Telegram. He sees pictures. Al-Raqqa, capital of the Islamic State. The Mujahideen returning with loot and with women. I mean, the site of the victorious army of God. So he sends a direct message. And he waits for a response. As he does, he finally falls asleep, exhausted. Just before he does, he Googles what Al-Gharib means in English. The outsider, the stranger. Back up north, and Marwan watches that video over and over again on loop all night. So in the morning, it's like he's seeing that girl's face everywhere. When he meets a young refugee from Syria, a girl from Damascus, giving out leaflets outside a mosque with that girl's face on it, it makes him shudder to see that face illuminating simple physical paper. So that night, he takes 3 of his friends to the Damascene Woman's fundraiser, and they all donate. From all the room, he's the first to volunteer to go to Syria with a convoy. When he gets home, he thinks about telling his father. He will. He doesn't want to, but he'll make sure he does. In bed, he remembers to set an alarm, and so catches the soft twinkle of WhatsApp green on his iPhone. And when he opens it, it's her. So that night, as Atif scrolls up and down his magazines online, Marwan will dream of a united Muslim nation, of saving that girl he's seen die over and over again. He'll dream of his Damascene woman, of children, legal careers, like a modern Islamic pride, of walking together in a liberated Muslim country, of a certain kind of dignity. I don't know about you, but I find people very critical of social media. They'll talk about Facebook being a bubble or Twitter being an echo chamber, but that's not my experience at all. I've met some fucking incredible people on social media I couldn't have met any other way. When I first started researching this show, I met a gay rabbi from Alabama on Facebook. That's not even the setup to a joke, that's me just inviting you to briefly think about the problems in that man's life. I was talking to him about all this subject matter, and he said this thing that I just found incredible, that stuck with me all the way through the process. He said, it's not about people's religion. If you're a bigot when you pick a book up, you'll be a bigot when you put that book down. I think the other thing I love about social media is the way it lets you just play around with the fringes of your identity a little bit. So, become someone else to some extent. So, I'm not someone who suffers fools all that gladly in real life, but on Facebook and Twitter, I can really rip chunks off people in a way that feels like it lets off a bit of steam, and if you're still connected to those parts of the world that have military police forces, dictatorships, prisons for dissidents, then that ability to change who you are a little, it's not just the source of banter, it's something that keeps you safe. When I first started researching this show, originally I was going to make it about ISIS brides, if you remember that whole shebang. Now, it's probably not going to surprise you to learn that I, a non-practicing, basically secular Shia Muslim, get almost nowhere trying to start a conversation online with young women who've gone halfway around the world to join a violent Sunni extremist organisation. And more to the point, all you've got to do is check out their profiles to see that they're probably not going to take all that kindly to some random guy trying to slide into the old DMs on Twitter. So, for better for worse, this show is almost entirely about men. Women, insofar as they exist in this space, sit up on that screen, two-dimensional, like a kind of fantasy. It does seem, however much I reach out around the world and meet people I couldn't otherwise, there's this depth of difference that I can't get across. This second cell could be anywhere, but it isn't. From the uniforms, the heat, the way the inmates speak Arabic, we know that this is a cell in Jordan, 1985. A large, tattooed, convicted pimp with a heavy drink problem stands up and walks across the exercise yard to the prayer room. In it, he'll meet the old man who's changed his life, an Egyptian who knew Sayyid Qutb half a lifetime ago. On the tiny prayer room TV, the old man has shown him videos of Afghan peasants, little more than shepherds, fighting off Soviet tanks and warplanes. And so, in the coming amnesty, that tattooed pimp, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, will travel to Afghanistan to seek his salvation and fight. September 11th, 2001. A shockwave rips through the world and we ride it, grasping it to this bleak and desolate field. From the black flags on the tin huts, the uniforms, the way the soldiers speak Arabic but their servants speak Pashto, we know that this is an Al-Qaeda affiliate training camp in Herat, Afghanistan. Al-Zarqawi watches the fallout on TV with his two closest associates. Within an hour, they see footage from George W. Bush speaking from a hideout near the Pentagon.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists. Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
From a small conspiracy of men, Al-Qaeda has become the name of a world-shaking nightmare. So Al-Zarqawi recognizes his mentor's strategic genius because Bin Laden knows you judge a man by the quality of his enemies. And in the two-dimensional crucible of a million digital screens, Bin Laden's just made the greatest and most powerful enemy in the world. And so Al-Zarqawi travels to Iraq with $250,000 and 24 followers. He will break that ancient country. Him and his followers begin a campaign of horrendous brutality. They make grainy videos, brutally beheading Shia civilians slowly and with blunt knives. Those videos will travel the world via CNN and the BBC, a visual justification of our campaign of occupation. Whilst his supporters revel in the blood of Shia women and children, Shia militiamen begin a horrendous campaign of collective punishment against any innocent Sunni civilian they could find. Qutb's vision of redemption and apocalypse wrought through violence comes to life on our TV screens, in our computers, made of those grainy images, of that murder and bloodshed. The Islamic State is born. And there's a final character in this play too. He's a white boy from a sort of comfortable, suburban, upper-middle-class bedroom in Orange County, California. He's called Ethan, and online he's mainly known as For the Lulz. But before I can get into his story, I need to tell you a little bit about where he spends most of his time, which is on a website called 4chan. 4chan's like the ground zero of internet culture. It's where a lot of the memes we love most about the internet were born. Pepe the Frog, lolcats, Doug, even the very language of memes, you know, the funny picture and the big white text, that's a 4chan creation. If you've ever used a word like lol for laugh out loud or FTW for the win, that originally was a 4chan word that somehow like kind of flipped out and got into our vocabulary mouths as well. Although the 4chan boys don't say lol anymore, not for a while, they say kek, because that's like a Korean transliteration of lol or something, and they're basically a bit like that. Like, they don't say wank, they say fap, because that's some sort of a Japanese anime connotation or something. You also need to know a little bit about 4chan's main chat room, which is called B, or Random. It's a picture messaging board, so you post a picture or a video and some text. If your shit is engaged with, it stays up at the top and you are popular. If it's not for any length of time, it falls off the bottom into a sort of internet oblivion. There's very much a game to try to win on B, or Random. It's a sort of storm of lurid and disgusting images, pictures and videos claiming to be of acts of sexual assault, real acts of rape, horrendous acts of violence, some of them racial in nature, into which you throw your own and you sort of hope that it will catch. In that space, what I take to be the normal distinction between irony and sincerity very much collapses. So you post a rape video, kind of for the lols, but also kind of because you deserved it. All you have to stand out and to win is how much you can reduce things to a two-dimensional image and how much you can grab by shock. And it's in that space, for those reasons, that Ethan, or For the Lulz as he's known online, first watched that video of the Syrian girl being bombed. The first time 4chan came to the attention of the mainstream media was through something called Gamergate.
And if you ever wanted to know what Gamergate was really about, the next 5 minutes are for you.
Yeah.
Okay. we're all used to seeing these social justice warriors who
Yeah.
want to police language, who say that,
We're going to do plenty on them.
extraordinary random things are sexist or racist or misogynist or whatever.
Right.
The second half of it is the social justice warriors we mentioned briefly. There is a sort of insurgent move in video games from a couple of wacky left-wing feminists, and these are sort of far-left, Israel-hating, socialist weirdos. Far-left feminists who say that every video game is problematic, that there is something wrong with all these video games.
Now, if you need that translating from Miloese into sort of regular English, Gamergate was in fact a series of events that began when a female computer games journalist and reviewer called Anita Sarkeesian wrote a series of blog posts and made a series of videos online. What she pointed out was that there's a contradiction at the heart of modern computer games. So on the one hand, there's been a massive change in who plays computer games online. About half the online audience nowadays are young women. At the same time, there hasn't been a concomitant shift in the kind of characters that exist in the kind of female gender in that space. They remain limited to one of two stereotypes, either damsels in distress or what Sarkeesian called, wonderfully in my opinion, slutty action hero objects of desire, who are filmed, so to speak, almost entirely from behind and below. For this, Sarkeesian was made the object of a horrendous campaign of online harassment. And so to 2016, where inside a different screen a hero crouches by the gates of an acropolis. The red sun dawns. He flexes his muscles and he waits. Now, there is a difference between him in real life and him on the screen. It's not that he's hated in real life so much as he's ignored. He's ignored by his teachers, ignored by the more popular kids, and ignored by women. It's the women that stick in the craw the most, so he guards that bitterness jealously and lets it grow and twist in his heart. But here, he's building himself. He's making himself feel real. And so he's an effective and powerful military commander. So tonight, he'll raid with comrades of much greater strength and experience than him. He's got everything to win or everything to lose. The fighters gather. They wait for a commander. A voice begins to crackle down his headset and it's a woman. So as the mission progresses, he has to take her directions. Her voice starts to grind him down, and when his character's killed, it's her that laughs first. So back in a chat room on an app called Discord, which is a sort of gamer's WhatsApp, he licks his wounds. Soft fingers flicking over the network of cells and ideas that tell him how he's been hurt and oppressed, the way he thinks he is. Like Neo in The Matrix, he swallowed a red pill. And this red pill is a meme, and a meme can be a collection of ideas and platforms just as much as it can be a funny picture and some big white text. Now, this red pill tells him that women are breaking the eternal destiny of their biology. That the gender pay gap is a myth, that feminism is basically female butthurt and hypocrisy, because actually men and women are very different. Women have like sexual power, whereas men have actual power, money, careers. Women say they want these kind of nice guy beta boyfriends, but actually they give it all up to these alpha bad boys and just use the beta ones. He learns about this thing called racial realism that teaches him how different races can't get along just because the liberals say they can. And cuckolds, or cooks, they're sort of soft white men who let women and minorities walk all over them. So in that comfortable Orange County bedroom, he might look alone, but he's invisibly surrounded. Down his headset, he'll start to hear crackling like a choir of male voices, the stiffening of necks, the willful dismissal of flesh, bodies all disciplined to that same slack and crampening decay, focusing every beat of idle resentment, every ounce of frustration onto an infinity of screens. If you were to stand back from it for a second and try and take it all in, or dive into it for that matter, it could, you think, be the network of cells, carved out by the generations of monks in some monastic order 1,000 years ago, or a 3D infographic describing the users of a porn aggregator site, but it isn't. It's a campaign of personal terror that leads to a female computer games journalist's door being kicked in by a police SWAT team in the middle of the night. Oh, he's come a long way in this world. He's found a way to reach out through that screen and bring real life, pain and suffering, humiliation, in the way he thinks he's taken it half his life. So satisfied, he'll fap half-heartedly and then go to sleep. So that kind of harassment that Sarkeesian faced culminates in an act called doxing. Now, doxing is the release of someone's personal private data onto the internet in such a way as their online life and their real life can be made to line up. And what this allows their harassers to do is target them at home and at work, get them in trouble with their boss, get them in trouble with the police. In an act called swatting, it allows them to play so many fake stories with the police about you that an armed response SWAT team kicks your door down like in the middle of the night. I think what's creepiest is it allows your harassers to send you super specific, bespoke death and rape threats to you and yours where you live at home. Now, this sort of behavior has a name. In social psychology, it's called de-individuation. It's that feeling you get when you're part of a group. So, on the one hand, you have a reduced sense of personal responsibility, and hand in hand, you get a much greater sense of collective power. So these lads, they've got their own weird theory for where this glimmer of real-world power came from. I'm going to be honest with you, this bit's going to get really fucking weird really fucking quickly, so bear with it. Someone posted this ancient Egyptian hieroglyph on 4chan, supposedly authentic. An ancient Egyptian hieroglyph which shows a frog-headed god. Like you'll recall, Pepe the Frog has a frog's head. Someone else pointed out that to the ancient Egyptians in ancient Coptic, this frog-headed god was called Kek. Like you'll recall, lollies in Korean. And someone else pointed out that to the ancient Egyptians, this was their god of chaos. Precisely what the 4chan boys would flatter themselves they are bringing to their enemies, the feminists and the liberals. A frog-headed god of chaos called Kek, somehow being, reborn through the power of teenage resentment and the internet. This is like the power of meme-made logos, made God. I don't think you're supposed to take it seriously, but in any case, during the Trump-Clinton election, 4chan was alive with memes in that same Irono-serious register, this time in support of Donald Trump. What you've got to understand is that, of course, lads like that support Trump, because to them, he's like the social failure in chief, you know? They called him the clown prince, or the god emperor. He's this sort of fat, swaggering daddy, who, as one commentator charmingly put it, was going to put a car in every white man's drive and an Aryan woman in every white man's bed. He set their hearts on fire.
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me. I agree. You'll never get bored with winning. We never get bored.
So, I think the idea is that whilst it's easy to laugh at Kek's mystical powers, the claim is that he called the previous American election right when the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Guardian of London did not. And in the rest of that hieroglyph, you're also supposed to see other things. So those boys will tell you that the next symbol along from Kek is something which looks uncannily like a computer screen, behind which sits something looking uncannily like our modern symbol for DNA. So they believe it's their destiny somehow to reach through their screens and change who you are forever. Obviously, the easiest way for me to show you what it's like to hang out on 4chan would be to WhatsApp your link to it. I can't, because strictly speaking, that would take this show to the fringes of the Obscene Publications Act. In the same way that if I sent you everything I wanted from Daber magazine, there would be questions to answer around the Prevention of Terrorism Act. So I can't. But what I can say is obviously all of this shit is in that machine in your pocket, only ever 2, maybe 3 clicks away at any time. I think, having seen a lot of weird shit on the internet researching this show, it's stuff like that that weirded me out the most. Obviously, if you're about my age, you got my politics, you kind of mainly take in the headline of Brexit and Trump. You say, well, it's a vote by like an older generation who don't want to get on board with how me and my lot want to live and want to sort of give it to us a bit before they leave the stage of history. But it's quite another thing to think of this cadre of riled up young men, you know? Okay, having said that, we've got all this WhatsApp group here between us. Get on there and tell me, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen on the internet? That southern seaside town might seem as dark as before, but Atif started seeing light in the rain. I mean, he's lonelier than ever, but he's been invited to a secret social network site called Scent of Paradise. They don't have any political or theological conversations at all. The conversations are all much more simple. One night, at home, he sees more footage from Iraq on TV. He sees men that look like him, although their faces are covered, and white men on their knees waiting for the blade. He sees the long, slow curve of the arm and then that change of texture into sinew and blood as the blade bites. The next day at work, he's taken from the shop floor and sent to the back room to fix the computers. Once he'd have been gutted. No sales, no ranking, no bonus, but he doesn't care anymore. He catches his reflection in the mirror above the lockers in the back room. His shoulders look kind of angular and drawn. His arms are sort of flabby and shapeless. There's no blue light to soften, it's just cold, clear glass. But he stares back. It's almost like he can make his shoulders broader. His arms get thicker. He renders himself a kefir, puts in his hands a gun and then a knife, and around himself he draws the flash of silver blade, the singing and the call to arms, overlaid with this call of duty, the call to jihad. So that night, he books himself his flight to Turkey. He messages Al Gharib one final time, and he waits for a final response. Meanwhile, from northern England, our taller, thinner teacher Marwan made it to Syria with his convoy. He seemed to drop off the face of the earth. No one heard from him, not even his father or his Damascene woman via WhatsApp. And now he's returning in an aeroplane, circling London Heathrow Airport. Following the instructions he was given, he brought the bag back with him and did not look for what was inside. The smell of the war still sticks in his nostrils. There are fragments of it on his hair and in his beard. The captain apologizes for the delay and Marwan just sweats. He feels a hand on his shoulder. A hand on his shoulder. A hand on his shoulder. Sir, you need to put your seatbelt back on, sir. The plane lurches. Marwan will do anything to let the world know how the Muslims have suffered. And so 4 cars scream through the streets, their sirens blazing. 24 armed men take up positions out of sight, but in range. And then silence. The plane lands. Marwan breathes in. He picks up the bag and walks down the plastic gangway to the arrivals desk. Before he can breathe out, he's on the floor, the bag ripped from his hands. Inside, they find some notes in sterling, some mobile phones, and letters from Syrians to their family already settled in the UK, and nothing else. And when the court case comes, all he can think about is what he saw out there. And when the conviction comes, none of it matters. Not that he drove an ambulance. Not that the grief is killing his father. Not that the group he briefly met had been vetted by the Americans. Not that Western military powers coordinated airstrikes with them. All that matters is that he's a Muslim. 6 years, short and clear. Terrorism act. He's taken down. Of all the young men who I tried to have conversations with online when I was researching this show, the closest I ever came to a real conversation with one of them was, I suppose, a bit of banter maybe with one of the ISIS recruiters that the Al Gharib character is based on. I sent him a link to an article in The Guardian that I thought was fucking hilarious. It was about these young lads who'd gone off to Syria to go Mujahideen, you know, and join the Islamic State and make jihad and all this kind of stuff. Now, the problem these boys had is that they'd spent the entirety of their short careers since leaving school working in offices, and none of them ever went to the gym. So when they got to Syria, they failed basic training. They were too unfit for the jihad. And the problem that ISIS had is that, well, these boys were English recruits, so they were too good as propaganda to just murder and leave in a ditch somewhere. So ISIS basically gave them the run of a villa they'd seized from some sort of Assad regime apparatchik. And these boys spent the next few months basically playing around in this swimming pool they'd been given, taking photos of it, putting it on Instagram, having arguments about Twitter about fucking who makes the best parathas like their mum does back at home, until finally, whoever the fuck it is, manages social media for ISIS made them stop. And my point is just this. These boys are basically gap year students, you know? And I feel like we had a shared moment of banter, but maybe 2, maybe 3 messages later, I get a picture of a hand from him like this, covered in blood, that says the best medicine for the Shia is bullets. And I think, well, that's probably the end of this relationship, you know? When I decided that I wanted to talk to some of the more alt-right, men's right, far-right sort of guys, I thought, well, look, I know what these boys think about people of colour. I know what they think about ethnic minorities. I certainly know what they think about Muslims. So I'm going to have to go undercover. So I did. I whited up. Javad Alipour became James Allport, and I started sending a few messages on Discord. Now, I still got blocked by almost everyone on that server. In long story short, top end of things, 24 minutes. Which led me inexorably, as you can imagine, to 2 conclusions. The first is that I am a shit spy. The second is that whilst there might be some surface level similarities between me and these young men, we might be roughly the same age, we might use the internet in broadly similar ways, there are some much deeper differences. I don't think it's as simple as saying that we think differently. Of course we think differently. I think it's that we change the way we think differently. So for me, real substantial changes in thought are something which come quite slowly. It feels like they tie my ideas to my body. Like I always say if you're born and brought up a Muslim, yeah? And then with all your heart, you convert to Christianity. You must still feel pretty fucking weird the first time you eat a bacon sandwich. Because you've been through this big change, but now you've got to swallow it down and get it in your body, chew on it. But on the screen, there is no body. So, like, that's why the metaphor is a pill that you just swallow, I think, or a click, you know? Like, for instance, in ancient times, even the explosive growth of an idea like Christianity or Islam would take 500 years, half a millennium, to reach its full height. But on the screen, ideas get stripped away from bodies. So it's like they can move as ideas. Souls move as souls. Spirits move as spirits. And they accelerate. So all around the world, we've got a generation of young men riddled with resentment and frustration who are telling themselves that they're kneeling before an altar of a screen, baptizing themselves in all that soft blue light. Within a few clicks, they think they could be at the gates of Jerusalem, at the heart of an army of fellow believers. And they're telling themselves that they've got cities to destroy. This final cell could be anywhere, but it isn't. from the orange boiler suits the prisoners are forced to wear, the interrogation techniques practiced, and the way the guards keep pictures, we know that this is an American detention facility during the early years of the Iraqi occupation. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi is long dead, but his jail cell vision of redemption and apocalypse wrought through violence has been handed on to his successor, and this cell is the perfect place for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to network and plan, because every disempowered and alienated Sunni extremist who will help him build the Islamic State has been put in there with him. Al-Baghdadi believes in an ancient and now mostly forgotten prophecy, that all Muslims will be split away from all non-Muslims in a final apocalyptic battle in a sleepy Syrian village called Dabigh. But Baghdadi's got two problems. Most Muslims don't agree with him, and most Europeans want to live with him. To Baghdadi and ISIS, such people are called the grey zone. The grey zone is liberalism and human rights, democracy and social justice, the idea that we all get a say. It's everything that's supposed to bind us together. But Baghdadi's got a plan. He'll bring to life the nighttime stories about Muslims that Europeans have told themselves since they first set out to crusade to life in the colour of Game of Thrones, Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty. So young men, some with English accents, will force white men to their knees in the middle of a vast and ceaseless desert. Though you might not know the difference, they don't hold their knives to maximise cutting efficiency, but the dramatic angle of their arms as they carve. And in their eyes you'll see burning an eternity of threats from the east, from Thermopylae to the gates of Vienna. And those nightmares brought to life in Europe are echoes of those nightmares first brought to life in the desert. Videos will claim the latest atrocities in the name of the Islamic State, and then a backlash. Bataclan, Parliament Square, Manchester, Nice, a man stabbed to death outside of a mosque in Chorlton, another outside a mosque in London, an English politician, a mother bleeding to death on a cold Yorkshire street, Muslim people's homes set on fire all through Paris. And those visions of death in Europe we remember are ones that kill just a handful of people in the context of a civil war that's killed 500,000, but when they kill with a voice that we know, with a costume that we drew, with a knife that we gave to them.
That same sort of slightly stale smell of a sweaty teenager is still staining the air in that comfortable Orange County bedroom. But there's a new president in the White House, and Ethan and his brothers kind of think they helped put him there. He's been watching that same video of Jihadi John too, but just for the lols on 4chan. It's not the first time he's got off on a truly horrible post, and it will not be the last. The night before one of them school shootings that killed 4 young women, someone posted this. So not senseless sexist murder, but a beat uprising against the women that kept him down. He loved it. But you see the next day when his parents talked about it over the long kitchen table at breakfast and the Latina maid poured coffee, he wouldn't look any of them in the eye. But anyway, back to the day of Trump's inauguration. And he's seeing footage of people like Steve Bannon, Richard Spencer, names he recognises from his corners of the web, about to take up some of the most powerful and influential positions in the world. So for the first time in years, he watches one thing at once on one screen.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
No more of his mum's hypocritical discomfort when she bumps into a black boy in the street. Not his dad's when someone talks about feminism, but a cold, clear line, he thinks. All the cooks and the degenerates on one side and him and his brothers on the other. That night, he's invited to a secure Discord forum called Make Europe Great Again. Make Europe Great Again is part of Make Everything Great Again. It's an international electronic online storm, bringing the skills he's learnt gaming YouTube algorithms, harassing computer games journalists, and trolling online forums to the service of this international wave of political reaction. It's a generation of gamers, losers, and lost boys, uniting with Russian hackers, data scientists, right-wing journalists, who think they can change our world. In that forum, he feels to himself elevated. Every trick of his trackpad now is to him a world-changing gesture. That stinking bile of resentment that flows through his veins, he thinks, can start to eke out through his fingertips, drip through the screen, and onto the kindling of resentment that sits in the heart of every forgotten bigot and left behind racist in Europe. And then he prays for a match. Atif, our fat boy from the southern seaside town, has finally made it to Syria, so he crouches. The regime helicopter blades circle overhead. The brother next to him gestures to the airbase. They're here to take it or to achieve martyrdom. Adrenaline, and Atif runs, firing wildly like he could do this forever. The soldiers in regime uniform keep firing, and the brother next to him has to bring him crashing to his feet just as every last drop of adrenaline crashes from his body. His legs are heavy. You can't actually move them, and the soldiers in regime uniform keep firing, and slap. Something hits him in the back of the leg. Thousands of miles from his rain-lashed southern English seafront town. From his dreams of glory, maybe death. Just fucking something. This is all he is. A body that won't move, a face in the dirt, and now the warm metallic pressure of a handgun in the desert heat against the back of his head. He doesn't think of all the ways he's failed. That for him, the adventure ends before it even starts. He thinks about his mum, taking her in magazines when she's in hospital. He starts to choke against the sand and dirt that's being ground further down his throat. It can't end here, he thinks. Like this. Some man's feet. And then the trigger's pulled. But it's just a thin, dry click. A thin, dry click, and the brother next to him helps him to his feet. The exercise is finished. It's the end of basic training, and Atif's failed. So here he's sitting, thousands of miles from home, at the heart of the Islamic State, and he's unemployed? Got nothing to do. So in the coming months, he'll be transferred. First to the logistics department, where his complete lack of speed and organisational ability will have him transferred to the Sharia policing department of Al-Ragha city, where his absolute inability to pick up even rudimentary Arabic, not to mention his complete ignorance of anything actually approaching Islamic law, will have him transferred to the one job he's ever been any good at. Simple tech support. This time in the back room of the Al Hayat Media, Al-Ragha, capital of the Islamic State. We left our taller, thinner teacher Marwan in a northern jail cell, and we left him with a spirit which is half bravery and half timidity, which means his days in jail will pass slowly but efficiently, because he'll never ask for anything, carry out every order. Model prisoner, good behaviour, out in 2.5 years. His dad's dead. So he's alone on that first free day, and he's alone as he takes that old bus, this time past the crumbling primary school, and he's alone as he steps out onto the northern graveyard grass. Alone and now absolutely unemployable. So networks are reactivated. All the eyes watch. London, Dover, Calais, Paris, Istanbul. The Syrian border. He wants to teach English. So when the roads are open, the rebels take him to Aleppo. The shelling increases, and street by street the city's lost. As all who can leave, Marwan is left with the final of the English and Americans. On what they think is their final night alive, they send out the final things they have to say to those that they've loved. Nothing more than digital palimpsests of themselves to those they're leaving behind. When they think it's all finished, they look up. And on that final night, Russian bombs light up the ancient city skies like the fires promised in the holy books. The next day, piles of corpses surround the city. The UN have negotiated a cordon from Aleppo to Idlib, the last province held by rebel forces. Marwan's name is called, along with the final of the English and Americans. Civilians are crying, and he helps them carry anything he can. On the highway, the coach is stopped at a regime checkpoint. Mothers and children begin to squeeze fathers' hands because they know what's going to happen. Marwan doesn't.
From his seat on the coach through the window, he sees some men who've been chosen taken outside and then beaten to death. It takes about 9 blows to kill the first man. And somewhere between strikes 6 and 8, Marwan knows he won't be leaving Idlib.
I've been on the internet all my life. I've been involved in politics all my life. But there's nothing I've ever done or been through that gives me any purchase on the way these young men have lived and what their narrative through that world is. There's a spreadsheet you can access online which lists about the first 250 young men in England or in France convicted of anything to do with so-called violent Islamic extremism. Of that 250 young men, not one of them had ever been a member of a Syria Solidarity group or a Palestinian Solidarity campaign. None of them had ever previously been a member of like an anti-racist group or an organisation that was against Islamophobia, and only one of them had ever briefly been a member of an Islamic human rights NGO. So something that they're going through is new, and I don't know what to call it. And even worse than that, we have to be careful. This energy has a way of getting inside of our hearts and mouths too. On one of those chats I've always got open, a friend of mine, mixed race like me, left wing like me, a journalist, he called another man a cook in an argument about politics. I said, bro, come on, man. We're supposed to be on the feminist side. That word shouldn't mean anything to us. He said, oh, don't worry about it. I've just been on holiday in Italy, and Italian men say it all the time. In Italy, apparently, you know, if you humiliate another man or beat him in an argument, you say cornuto, cuckold. I said, bro, if your defense against something being sexist is that Italian men do it, I'm not sure how many you actually met. But anyway, the point is, on the screen, the normal distinction between truth, sincerity, falsehood, irony seems to collapse. So, just when we opened this show 3 years ago, the Borussia Dortmund football team coach was attacked by assailants unknown in Germany. Immediately, the social media accounts I'd been watching fire into life. ISIS supporting ones claiming it in the name of the Islamic State. Alt-right supporting ones claiming that it's proof, if proof were needed, that Merkel has cooked the German population by importing terrorists dressed as refugees. Of course, within a few weeks, the German police solved the case. And in fact, the coach was actually attacked by German gangsters trying to fix the results of a football match. But on the screen, the grey zone is kind of always already collapsing. So there's always already a war being fought. And that's why I know that whatever else happens, Marwan, Ethan and Atif, having been born in front of that same sort of screen, watching that same sort of video, although blown apart by a world and a war and events, will come back together at the beating heart of it.
In that comfortable Orange County bedroom, his fingers feel electric. He sits at the screen, watching the results of the Italian referendum come in 4 different languages. The smooth movement of his fingers across keys belays the aggression and command of his online tone. He barks orders to the whole of Make Everything Great Again. Him and his brothers are pumping out memes and fake news. They fly from the fingertips of his rotting body, out of the screen, exploding into physical attacks, burnt refugee camps and piles of votes. He sits, a king at the centre of a vast and restless army of the bitter. A multinational horde has gathered, sick of women who say no, sick of feeling afraid, and sick of feeling humiliated by men who are different to them. He looks up. The world is being reshaped in his hateful and divided image. A ping. A softly flashing orange light, and he checks Discord. A new video. This is the one that they've been waiting for. A video that will bring thousands more to their side, because thousands of miles away in a baking hot room in Raqqa, that fat boy from by the sea crouches in the server room of Al Hayat Media, surrounded by video editing brothers, each churning through hours and hours of footage, seeking that moment where reality and fantasy collide and the grey zone falls. Because hundreds of miles away from them in Idlib, Marwan, the thin teacher from the north, knows what he has to do. He sees it in the eyes of the starving ones, punished collectively for demanding an end to dictatorship and the Assad regime. So when the siege tightens and the call for all able-bodied men comes, he knows he'll answer. Just like he knows what the Russian jets in the sky mean, And he knows that when all the other fighters are killed, it will be him, a belt of explosives and a squad of regime soldiers outside the building that he's sheltered in. To say he prays before he dies is to simplify the song that's on his lips. It's hope, an invocation to a future that he hopes will come to this country that he's learnt to love. He begs his father's forgiveness. As the first armoured vehicle approaches, he walks out into that bright and sun-drenched street. And so, the video of his death is uploaded onto YouTube. And Marwan, dying for the love of a foreign and burning country, is rendered onto a screen. His image burning through wires serviced by Atif to a design centre in ISIS-controlled Raqqa, where it's retouched and re-edited by ISIS designers, where Marwan is made broader and stronger, recoloured with the orange sand and grey steel sky of pixels and tree colour and screens you want to swim into. A voiceover's added. His death, and so his life, is claimed not for the group he died with, not for freedom or democracy, but for fascism and the Islamic State. It's broadcast onto wires and satellites that take it halfway around the world, to that comfortable bedroom in Orange County, where a white man can see a smartphone light glow the soft orange light of a new Discord message, the jackpot, a video of a Western jihadi, a video of an English Muslim fighting for the terrorists in the Middle East. Muslims and Europeans can't live together. Tough measures. Reclaim our countries. Send them back. Ban them. Ethan sends messages, demands translations, links to news aggregators and right-wing news sites. He clicks send. All across Europe, people go to the polls. Muslim against non-Muslim. White against black. Sides are chosen. Brotherhoods are chosen. And the grey zone and democracy begin to tumble. Ethan's work finds a waiting and willing audience.